Antibiotics in a base of petroleum jelly? No thank you. I personally am not interested in contributing to antibiotic resistance, and really these kinds of ingredients, I don't really want them on my skin unless it's absolutely necessary. It's time to toss out the antibiotic ointment and make our very own natural, safe, and really effective homemade version. Check it out. Antibiotic ointment has definitely been shown to be a contributing factor to the rising amount of antibiotic-resistant bacteria that we have in our world today. It's becoming something that we should all be worried about. So it's time to stop using that unless we really need to. We need to save that for when it's totally necessary. Good news is we have some really, really effective herbs that we can use in order to make our very own. They don't cause antibiotic resistance, and they're actually really healthful for your body, and they're really great for healing any sort of first aid sort of issue. I'm gonna go grab the baby and we're gonna head out into the medicinal herb garden and gather some herbs. So let's go. Here we are out in the cottage garden, and this is where I grow my medicinal and culinary herbs. There's so many fun things out here this year, and this year I've added more flowers just to bring in all the pollinators in because they're so pretty. We've got hollyhocks here. These are interchangeable medicinally with marshmallow, and so this is a great plant to have. Of course, the entire thing is edible, so I love having that. There's some oregano, some thyme, sunflowers. We have tarragon here that's still really little, some sage, apothecary roses. There are so many fun things, but today we are looking for a couple of plants in particular, so let's go find them. Here we are at the Monarda plant. This is also known as bergamot, or sometimes called bee balm. And this plant is absolutely amazing. And I love it for its antiseptic properties and antibiotic properties. This thing is antifungal, antimicrobial. It just kills off anything that gets in its way. And so it is an amazing plant to put into our salve. This is also very anti-inflammatory, which is great whenever you have any sort of a wound, anything that might be inflamed or angry. It helps calm it right down, and it's amazing for skin things. So this is one we're gonna grab a couple handfuls of. Here we are at the yarrow plant, and yarrow is the next herb we want to gather to get into our salve mix. This is an incredible plant when it comes to wounds. It's something we really use a lot here in the house for first aid purposes. It stops bleeding super fast. It helps wounds to heal more quickly. It has a little bit of antibiotic properties in it, but it is also really good at dropping the inflammation. And again, that's something we want when it comes to wound healing. We want to soothe and calm that wound. So here's some yarrow. We're going to grab some of this. It's not flowering yet, but you can use the leaves and the flowers if the flowers have come out yet, or just the leaves if that's what you have. Okay, and let's go find our last herb. This last herb we keep growing underneath our fruit trees because it's so good for them. It helps bring up a lot of minerals from way down deep in the earth with its big taproot, and then as the leaves die back, it mulches around the tree and it composts the tree, bringing those minerals to be available up to the tree roots, which aren't usually for fruit trees quite so deep. But this herb also has another really important use. This is comfrey, and comfrey is an amazing wound healer. This speeds your cell regeneration, which means that it makes your cells multiply and repair much faster than it would. It's slightly antibiotic, but it is very, very soothing and speeding to healing. So this is a herb we definitely want to get in here. Now this herb works so well, in fact, that you would not want to use anything that has this herb in it on a puncture wound or any sort of really deep wound. It is incredible for scrapes, for minor cuts, for smaller wounds, burns, stings, anything of that sort. So we are definitely going to get it into our antibiotic ointment today. All right, we have all of the herbs that we need for our salve today. So we're gonna head into the kitchen, we're gonna go ahead and make this. But I just wanna say that this is such an incredibly versatile salve. If you don't have any of these particular herbs, you could use chamomile, you could use cleavers, calendula. You can just mix and match the herbs that you do have that have great antibiotic and soothing and healing properties. And those will work out really, really well. So you don't have to use these exact herbs. All right, let's go see what we do in the kitchen. The first step to making our antibiotic salve is to make an herbal oil. Now, oil and water don't mix well, and they cause problems for herbal oils. Namely, they add moisture into the oil, which means you have a chance that things are going to mold. You don't want to do that. So the first step is to take your herbs and to lay them out and just let them wilt a little bit. You can just do this by laying them out on the counter for a few hours or for overnight. You can see that these are already nice and wilty. They're not dry. The bee balm's starting to get a little bit dried out, but they are nice and wilty, so they've lost some of that moisture, but they've still retained all of the herbal compounds that you want to have end up in your oil, and you won't have an oil that'll have a tendency to mold. So lay them out for a few hours on the counter. Now we're ready to make our herbal oil. The first step to this, really the only step to it, is to make sure you have an incredibly clean and again a very dry jar with a lid in order to make the oil. We want it dry, we don't want to introduce any of that moisture into it. Today we're just going to be using a really good quality olive oil. You could use any type of oil that you like using on your skin, like an almond oil would be another option. That's a little more expensive. Olive oils are really readily available and they're easy to find. I love getting mine from Azure Standard because I know that it's actually pure olive oil and it's not adulterated with all the other things that ends up in grocery store olive oils. So this is straight from Azure Standard because we're not growing any olive oil or any olives in North Idaho. Now this is really simple. I'm just gonna tear up my herbs a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and just get them into the jar. Now you'll notice that I'm not measuring anything, I'm not weighing anything, I'm not getting specific parts. I just kind of got a couple handfuls of each herb, and that's fine. We're going with something that's called a simpler's method of making our herbal oil. You could be really exact about this and grab scales and do it in a really fancy way, but this way works incredibly well if you're just using it for home use. Now we're just gonna fill up our jar. And then we're going to cover our herbs with the olive oil. I'm expecting that's going to take about a cup of oil, but we want to make sure that we cover them so that the bulk of the herbs are totally covered. This is important because we want to have a nice potent oil because that's where the antibiotics are coming from. So you wouldn't want to take a jar that's half filled with fresh herbs and completely fill it all the way to the top because you'd end up with a really weak oil. Now, if you can't get your hands on the fresh herbs, you can absolutely use dried herbs for this. You would just fill your jar to about a third full and then fill it all the rest of the way with your oil. That's because you've already lost all that moisture altogether in the herbs, and so they're much more potent when they're dried. We're gonna get a lid right on there. And what's the number one rule of homesteading or any DIY of any sort at all? And that is label everything. You may think that you're gonna remember what's in there, but a few months and you may not. So I'm gonna write on here just antibiotic salve oil. So I know exactly what this is going to be for. Make sure you always put the date on anything that you're doing. And then give it a good shake. Ideally, all of the herbs would be completely under the level of the oil. And you can see that most of them are, but there's a few that are still sticking up on top. It's because they still have enough moisture in them that they have a little rigidity to them. That's gonna go away in a little bit. But in the meantime, we wouldn't want any mold to start growing on anything that's on the top. So put this in a place that you go by regularly, maybe your kitchen, and every time you walk by it, give it a really good shake to make sure that you're disorganizing any mold spores that are starting to organize in there. There you go. And after a few days, this will all be shrunk down nice and small and will fit underneath the level just fine. Make sure you keep shaking it though. We're gonna let this sit for about 4 weeks to extract all of the wonderful healing compounds out of the herbs and into the oil. Now, here's one that I have had sitting for more like 2 months, and you can see it's changed color. This is a nice full jar, but the herbs have all softened up really well. So in order to use this oil, I'm ready to strain it off. Remember that the most potent parts of the oil are the ones that are stuck in the plant right now. And so we want to go ahead and really kind of give this a good squeeze to get it all drained out, get all of the oil out of it. You can even grab a little bit of cheesecloth or a clean t-shirt and put it in there and squeeze, squeeze, squeeze to get every single last drop out. Herbal oils can be used for all sorts of things in herbal medicine. You can use them absolutely plain. You could just rub this right onto your skin. You can use it for salve. You can use it in soap making to make an herbal soap. You can use it in food if you want. If you have palatable herbs that you're using, then you could use it as a oil to put into your salad dressings or to make things with. This is really, really useful. If you wanted to store this right now, I'd just put it back into a jar, make sure it's well labeled, put a lid on it, and store it in a cool, dark place. It'll store for about a year, holding on to its herbal properties really strongly. After about a year, it won't go bad, but it will start to decline in effectiveness and in potency. So at about that point, it's good to start over again. If at any point you ever see mold growing on your herbal oil, you know that you've let too much moisture get in there, and it's a good idea to go ahead and just toss it and start again. All right, I'm gonna gather the supplies I need for the next step of making our salve. We are ready to make our herbal salve. So let's talk about the different ingredients and supplies that we're gonna need. We have our herbal oil, and today we're gonna use about 1 cup of that herbal oil. So I have a little bit more, like 1 1/4 here, but I'll only use a cup of it. It's important for a salve to get the ratios correct of the different ingredients so that you end up with the texture that's right. You're also going to need some good quality beeswax. Now, this is beeswax from Beeswax. I really like this company because it's all American made. So you don't have to worry about what else might be in there. It's kind of known that beeswax can be adulterated with paraffin and different things like that. So this is complete beeswax. I love working with these small pellets. They melt so quickly. They're so much easier to use. But if you have your own beeswax, or all you can get is a block from your local beekeeper, then you can just grate or finely chop your beeswax. You're gonna need a small pot or pan. A lot of people keep cosmetic only dishware, but I find that I can use just my regular everyday stuff and wash it out really well. This is all food grade ingredients. There's nothing wrong here that you can't get into your food. It just might leave a little bit of a flavor behind. So make sure you wash it really well with really hot water when you're done. If you can, go with a really heavy bottomed pot. That will help keep the temperature low on your oil and diffuse the heat on it. Okay, the other things you're gonna need are a few essential oils. These are optional, but they really do help a lot in the healing process. Lavender essential oil is super soothing to the skin. It's very anti-inflammatory, it's antimicrobial in all different ways, antiviral, antifungal, and antibiotic. The same with the lemon essential oil. Now, all of these essential oils are fine for using with kids as long as they're properly diluted. So this salve is going to be totally safe for the children and babies in your family to have on their skin. I love the Plant Therapy brand of essential oils. I've used them for years, and they are very, very affordable for being a really high, great quality product. So I'll give you a link to those. I ran out of the Plant Therapy tea tree oil, but that's the other thing that we're gonna need. We're gonna need about a half of a teaspoon of a good tea tree essential oil. Tea tree oil is incredibly antimicrobial, so that counts for antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. So it goes right on into the salve. Now, vitamin E oil is going to act as a preservative for our salve, which is a wonderful thing because it's going to make it last on your shelf for about 2 years, retaining its strong and effective herbal properties. So you want a little bit of vitamin E oil. The good news is vitamin E oil is also really, really good for healing wounds and for your skin. So this is going to help reduce any scarring from any sort of small wound or abrasion on your skin. The last thing that you're going to need is some sort of really clean container. Something that is clean, preferably sterilized, and completely dry and ready to use. We're just going to use some small ball jars here. Okay, let's start measuring out ingredients. I'm going to weigh out 5 ounces of our beeswax. All right, just about exact. And I've got that cup of my herbal oil. Add my beeswax right on into that. And I'm ready to slowly heat that up to melt the beeswax and heat the oil. I don't want to bring any part of this to a hot temperature at any point. I want to make sure it stays nice and as cool as possible while still heating and melting that beeswax. So I'm just going to put that on a nice low temperature and just be patient, stirring occasionally. While my oil is heating and that beeswax is melting, I'm going to go ahead and take a moment and label some jars. I want to make sure to write right on there exactly what this is. Antibiotic salve and the date. It's great to put all of the ingredients on your label. I really, really like when that happens, but sometimes that's hard on a label like this. So either put it right on the label in small letters or go ahead and record what is in this in your herbal notebook, which is a great way to keep all of your remedies. Okay, I'm going to label the rest of these and keep that oil melting. All the beeswax is completely melted in here. You can see it's nice and liquid. We want to remove it right from the heat. The heat's off, but that heat is, the hot plate is still hot. So we want to go ahead and remove it from there. Once it is ready to go and completely melted, we're going to let it cool down for just a minute. We don't want to let it set up at all, but we want to give it a moment to cool down before we start putting our oils in. That way we don't evaporate off any of our oils faster than we need to. So we'll just give it a moment. This has just cooled down for about 1 minute and we're ready to move on to the next part. We're going to start with the tea tree essential oil. We're going to use half a teaspoon. And just pour that right on in. We're going to use 20 drops of a lavender essential oil and 10 drops of lemon. Now for the vitamin E oil, we're going to use about 25 drops, which equals about 1/4 of a teaspoon, or you can count it out by drops. Give it a really good stir. And we are ready to pour this into our prepared jars. I'm just gonna pour it into this small Pyrex measuring cup so I don't make a mess all over the place, which I already did. Okay, and set it right on into your jars. You can see wherever it touches something cool, it's already starting to harden. These jars are wide mouth half pint jars. So that means I'm getting about a cup in each of these jars. Look at that. Isn't that great? Now we're gonna let these cool uncovered until they're all the way hard, and it's not gonna take very long. It's gonna take several hours. They just have to cool all the way down, and that beeswax has to solidify. Then we'll be ready to get its lid on and put it in a cabinet for storage and be ready to use it whenever you need it for any sort of small wound, cut, burn, scrape, or anything like that. If you want the written direction for this recipe, go ahead and check out the blog post that I have linked. There's downloadable printable directions. And check out this video right here for another great remedy you can make in your own home. We'll see you soon.